Hello Australia, it's Karen Brewer here. Special hello to my mates in Victoria. You know, there's nothing on your telly worth watching, so I thought I'd just jump on and have a chat. See if anyone wants to join me if they want. Facebook censors are at it again, Australia. Gee, I might have to spook them out today. I might do a couple of these impromptu lives, a surprise live, just to keep the Facebook censors away from their smoko. It's always fun, isn't it, Australia? And so, a special g'day to all my mates in Victoria. You know, we all know there's absolutely nothing on the television worth to watch. So I thought I'd just pop on, see if anybody wants to join me for a live and say g'day or have a chat or whatever. I've just opened the guest request if you want. So I've busied myself today. Yes, of course, we all know charities are bullshit. Yeah, all charities are bullshit. I've covered the CEOs many, many times. And I'd just like to point out to people, you know, we have a lot of charities for abuse victims. You know, a lot of the politicians are reportedly patrons of them and whatnot. And yet, all these charities, you know, when you go look at their Facebook pages or you visit their websites, none of them have anything up there about Bill Heffernan or Franca Arena. Isn't that odd, Australia? You know, all these so-called abuse experts and things like that, and yet they're all mute. And when you research the CEOs of all these organisations, they're all Freemason, Demorlay connected. It's rather odd that, isn't it, Australia? Network of filth and all that. Yeah. And I'm not going to tolerate all these people. I mean, there was one bird, Tracy, her name is, she jumps on my page from time to time, tells me that I can't go labelling all politicians as guilty. Well, yes, I can. As a matter of fact, I do it every day. Yeah, and this is how it works, Tracy Cumberland. This is how it works. You see, Franca Arena gave her speeches in the 90s, about all the abuse and the cover-up with the Woods Royal Commission and all that. And that was 30 years ago. Well, it was when I went to school, you know. 1990 to 2020 when I went to school was 30 years worth of silence. That's a lot of fucking politicians, isn't it, Tracy? Yes, and they're all mute. And I also have the evidence of Scott Morrison's sorry speech, protection orders sealed for 90 and 80 years, and of course all the parliamentarians over the last 40 years mute on that abuse of power. And you see, Tracy, it's very simple, okay, because that silence convicts them. Yes, that's how it works, yes. The silence convicts them because normal people know that incest and child rape is wrong, Tracy. I believe the majority of normal people know that's wrong. I believe the majority of normal people who know that politicians and the bureaucracy and charities and all these so-called do-gooders who are all silent, I believe the majority of the people know that that silence convicts them too. Yeah, that's how it works, Tracy. So I'll just give you the heads up, Tracy. I've got a very low tolerance for people that make excuses for the silence. Yeah, have a very low tolerance for that. Yeah, that's a bit of a red flag on you. Yeah, so you might want to watch that. You might want to do a bit of soul searching and ask yourself, all this silence, does that make them guilty? Go in and meditate a bit, Tracy. Take it easy. Think it over for a while. I mean, most normal Australians know sort of straight off the cuff that shit's wrong, you know, but then there's probably a few special people that may have to think it over like you. Yeah, I don't have to think it over. My gut instinct tells me it's wrong and I'll go with that. Thanks very much. And just on charities, Australia, I'd really like you to draw your attention to the fact that all these so-called do-gooders, you know, all these so-called do-good organisations, they're not doing too much good, are they? All mute on the biggest abuse, most damaging abuse known to man. People that have been interfered with as children, it affects them for the rest of their life. And all these do-gooder associations, all mute. You know, of course, then you've got the salvos, and the salvos are one of the biggest perpetrators of the paedophilia. And of course, you know, Frank Hewson, you know, Brian and Scott Morrison, your Prime Minister, they're buddies, right? Well, Brian's daddy was Frank Hughes, and he was a big-time pedophile straight out of the Salvation Army. So I'm not too inspired by charities. I think their silence convicts them all now as being part of the Freemason Demolay network of filth in Australia. So it's best to keep your money in your pockets, and if you decide you want to be charitable to someone, I suggest you do it one hand to another. Yeah, that's the way I reckon it should be done, because I don't want to be feeding all these people, these bloody criminals as what they are. And of course you've got the guy from the Victorian Guide Dogs Association down there just a couple of years ago, done for knocking off $250,000 from the guide dogs, stealing from the blind. Interesting, isn't it? And of course, there was nothing on the telly, so I had to go and have a close look at Lisa Neville. She's the Minister for Police down there in Victoria. Now, it's interesting to note, Australia, just thought I'd mention it. Back in the 80s, I believe it was, they started psychologically testing the police. Because prior to that, you just had to basically be 6 foot tall to be a police officer, And they started psychologically testing the police because they were looking for narcissistic people to be the police service. And here we are, of course, 40 years later since they introduced the psychological testing, and of course it's manifesting itself in the streets. Now, Sol, yesterday, was down there at Parliament House in Victoria. He's a gentleman of about 70-odd years old. Very nicely spoken gentleman. Well, my goodness me, there must have been at least 15 rather abusive police officers. No manners. These people got no manners. They got no manners, Australia. Anyway, Lisa Neville. Lisa Neville, her name is, yes, from Mount Alvernia College in Queensland. Turns up down there in Victoria. And guess what, Australia? She's the Minister for Police in Victoria, is Lisa Neville. Yeah, on my page I just put a big photo up of Lisa. She's from the electorate of Ballerina. Ballerina. I think that's how you say it. Yeah, she's an interesting looking character. You might want to take a look at that photo, Australia. I suggest you do. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd pop on, say good day, see how yous are all doing. Hi Rita, hi Carlo, hi Lucia, hi Michelle. G'day Billy, how you doing? Anyway, I was also wondering whether there was anyone in the electorate of Ballerina who might want to talk to me, because I'd like to know how you're coping. I'd also like to know, does Lisa Neville, who is your electorate representative there in Victoria, does she inspire you? Do you feel proud of her? And it was interesting when I was looking closely at that electorate. There's nearly 49,500 voters in that electorate. Yeah. And do you know, Lisa only got 21,000, a bit over 21,000 number ones. Yeah. That's not even halfway, is it, Australia? Half of 49 when I went to school was 24,500. A half of 49,000. Maths might have changed now in schools, I don't know. But when I went to school, 49,500 divided by 2, you sort of got to get pretty close to that 25,000 mark, haven't you? No, she only got 21,000. Yeah, so I'd say that preference voting's pretty fucked. Yeah, I don't do preference voting, no. As a matter of fact, until I get a candidate that meets my shopping list, I draw a line through every name, on every ballot paper, because there's no suitable candidate for me to vote for. But if I did find myself a candidate to vote for, I'd put a number 1, and then I'd draw a line through every other name. Yeah, because I don't buy into that preference voting bullshit. I think we've got enough evidence under our belts now to show that doesn't fucking work, does it, Australia? That preference voting, it doesn't work. And see, Australians all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. That's what our anthem says. And as a free woman, I just vote the way I like, the way I say, because I make the rules, so... But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a candidate that's worth putting my number in a box for, so they've all just got a line through their names, yeah. But, if I ever did get one, it'd just be a number 1 and the rest would get a line, because I'm not having this preference bullshit no more. No. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Australia? Lisa Neville, I'd love to hear from those people in that electorate there of Ballerina. I'd love to know what they think of her, you know. It was interesting too, Dan came out yesterday saying that definitely businesses will close permanently. Just off the cuff, as though that was a perfectly normal sort of comment to make. I do hope my fellow Australians are waking up to the agenda. I hope yous are. Because the agenda is Freemason demorlais. They're serving other masters, and I think we've got enough evidence now to show us all they don't serve us, do they, Australia? You know? I mean, you'll remember about 8 months ago we had tragic fires go across the country. Remember that? Over 2,000 homes burnt. Nobody's talking about them. And, of course, then you've got to remember we got lots of farmers that went through terrible drought. And, you know, it doesn't just solve when it rains. You know, you get a bit of rain and it seems to go out of the people's minds, but it doesn't work that way. See, because what happens when you've been a farmer in drought? Okay, you end up racking up a lot of debt trying to buy feed and whatnot, you know, yeah. And that debt can take years and years, decades, in fact, to pay off. You know, so if you're there and you're all thinking that the farmers are doing okay now, you'd be wrong. You know, you got to remember this only happened within the last year, and these people still matter, I believe. You know, I believe our farmers matter. I think they matter a lot because, you know, they feed us. Yeah, your politicians, they don't feed you. No, your farmer feeds you. Yeah, that's a fact. And of course we've got fire victims still living in tents. You know, I share Harley's story a lot, you know, when he does his updates. Yeah, he's still living in a tent. Yeah, he's getting some foundations built in a little shed. He's getting there. No help from anyone, though, no. Just getting on with it all on his own, yeah. And he's still got a great sense of humour with it. I take my hat off to Harley. We should have him in our parliaments, quite frankly. I'd vote for Harley. And then, of course, we have a myriad of people that still want to go round with these non-descriptive terms, you know, like they and the government. Not copping that shit no more. The network is, in fact, Freemason demorlais. I've proved that, well documented it for over the last 2 years on my page. So it's time we all stopped using these generic terms and we started calling it as it is, the Freemason demorlais network of filth. And of course there you got your police minister in Victoria. Yeah, out of Queensland. Yeah, she's from Queensland. And I mean, you know, she's a big girl. She's a big girl, yeah. So you might want to go take a look at that photo. And I just, you know, leave a comment there. I mean, have a look at her resume. I've posted the link to her resume there on the Victorian Parliament. It's all in the post, as always. All of my posts contain the links. And I'd just be interested in a bit of feedback from my fellow Australians on what they think of Lisa Neville, you know. Do you think she's inspiring, and do you have confidence in that? Because I sort of look at the numbers of people that voted for her in her own electorate, and I don't think they've got confidence in her, you know. And I think the way those Victorian police are behaving down there, well, actually, I think the way the police officers are behaving across Australia is disgraceful. They've got no manners. And in the upshot of their no manners is the fact that they're harassing my fellow Australians over nothing. And yet all of these police can't seem to do nothing about rounding up the pedophiles that Senator Bill Heffernan referred to in his speech. Multiple speeches, actually. But, I mean, you know, the one of 20th of October 2015. Yeah, 2015, that was 5 years ago. A lot of silence, isn't it, Australia? You know, where he said, when the New South Wales police find it necessary to put a judge under surveillance, and that surveillance is dropped because of a lack of cooperation between the New South Wales police and the AFP, we have a problem. Yeah. Senator Bill Heffernan goes on to say, there's a whole lot of prominent people named in these documents, plural. And then he goes on to just talk about one document out of all of the documents that has 28 people, prominent people, including a former Prime Minister on this list. And it's a police document. Signed off by Gary Crook QC, Assistant to the Commissioner, Oh, it's pretty damning, isn't it? You know, but yet we've got Australian police officers smashing windows on vehicles of people because they want to know which shop they went to. Have they got a mask? It's extraordinary, isn't it, Australia? You've really got to sort of ask the question, what's wrong with the police services, haven't you? You've also got to ask the bigger question too. What's wrong with the families of these police officers? You know, because if that was my son or daughter that was behaving like that, like they did to Sol yesterday, I really think I'd be giving them a bit of a clip round the ear. You know, because I clearly, as a parent, haven't managed to instill any good manners on my kid if they've ended up being a police officer that behaves in such a way. And if you were married to that, well, my goodness, wouldn't you be ashamed? I certainly would be if I was married to something like that. I'd be very ashamed. And my word, wouldn't you be ashamed if they were your parents? Eh? Harassing a 70-year-old man like that. Yeah. Quite disgusting. And I think it's time all of us Australians started ramping up in regards to that unacceptable behaviour from our police. You know, so if you've got a neighbour that's a police officer, you might want to start talking to them because Australia's watching. We're not too happy with their loss of manners. No, we're not. And then after you've spoken to them, if the behaviour doesn't improve, I suggest you shun those people, Australia. Shun them. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to go around harassing 70-year-olds whilst the pedophiles go around doing what they're doing, while our politicians, 40 years worth of silence on this abuse of power. The silence around the Freemason Demolay network of filth we call our judiciary, bureaucracy and media. Can't be tolerated anymore, Australia. You must call it out every time, by name. Freemason Demolay network of filth. Anyway, I just thought I'd pop on, say g'day, you know, see if I can keep the Facebook censors busy, you know. We don't want to let them have it too easy, do we, Australia, you know. So you guys have a great day. Think about what I said with regards to charities. You know, Save the Children's Fund, World Vision, Save the Homeless and all this sort of shit, you know. Even down to things like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. Or mute. Got nothing to say about Bill's speech or the pedophiles in high places in our country. It's disturbing, isn't it, Australia, all that silence? It's disturbing. Anyway, I'd like you all to think that over. I'd also like you to think over people who make excuses for the inexcusable. I have very firm opinions that behaviour is entirely unacceptable. You know, but then again, I know incest and paedophilia are wrong. So therefore I call out the network of filth every day. Share the knowledge, guys, and I'll catch you all later this evening. I'm going to move it a bit later, Australia, you know, be putting the jug on a bit later. You know, there was a show in England, and it was called Not the 9 o'clock News. Yeah, I sometimes put my jug on around 9ish, 9:10, somewhere around there. You know, some people do, they have cuppers about 9 o'clock. You know what I mean, guys. Share the knowledge. Have a good day, but please think about what I said with regards to charities and the behaviour of our police service, Australia. That's not acceptable. We cannot have our police officers harassing the elderly, smashing the windows on vehicles, whilst we have pedophiles who are going unaccounted to run rampant and do whatever the fuck they like. That's not on, Australia. So speak up. Have a good day, guys. Bye.